So the process, remember, of UV unwrapping is really you're just taking your 3D model and you're turning it into a 2D version of itself, right? That's kind of peeled apart, skinned, kind of like an animal, or kind of you put seams on it to kind of break it up like clothes before they get sewn together on top of a body or the dummy of a body, right? So you really kind of want to think about it like that. You're taking the 3D model and you're turning it into something two-dimensional to go over a texture, right? An actual two-dimensional image, which could be a PNG format, OpenEXR if like you're at ILM or something like that. You know, JPEG if you really need it to be super efficient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it on the gear first because that's going to be a little bit quicker and easier for us to do. So I'm going to turn the biped visibility off. And for us, we're going to keep it simpler, and we're just going to unwrap half the model, right? And then mirror it back over. So we'll have UVs overlapping each other, which means you won't get the ability to do asymmetrical texturing, but you will also get bang for buck, right? Your texture will act twice as big as it is because it'll be the same texture on both sides. You will lose asymmetry. You can do this either way, right? Overlapping gives you that benefit, but you can, of course, just unwrap this wholly so there's no overlapping UVs for asymmetry. Because our computers, particularly your devices you're working on, are not as powerful as they should be, I'm going to try to maximize the potency of your scenes and just keep it a little simpler for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of half this model. So I'm going to go to 3 for face mode, right? And in 3 for face mode, I could select this face, and then shift left click to select that face, right? Remember, if you go to the select menu, you could use select linked. Now, by default, select linked has the quick key of right bracket. I change it to spacebar because I use it a good amount, and I think spacebar is kind of more where I want it to be. I'm not an animator, right? So I don't need spacebar for scrolling through animation, so I'm like, I'll use it for something better, for me personally better. So remember, select linked just selects the polygons directly linked to or connected to that. And we've gone over that several times, we've seen it before. I can hit delete, right? Delete on our keyboard, faces. Of course, I've already got a quick key for it, shift delete. Now I want to get rid of this half of the model. The easiest way to do that, since we're already in face mode for 3, is remember, you could actually select a face loop just like an edge loop, right? Remember, selecting an edge loop is double left click on an edge. When you're in face mode, though, if you double click on a face kind of close to, if you double click close to the edge between two faces, it'll select a face loop that direction. So if I did it this way, it selected that way. If I do it here, it does it this way, which is actually really, really cool. So I'm going to hit delete, faces. And now you see how this is actually not directly linked to the other half now. So I could easily use that select linked again and delete. Faces. And now that leaves me with half of the model. Now, we notice we have some workspaces up here, right? We've been working in the modeling workspace for a while here. If you go a couple over, there is one called UV editing, right? UV editing. So I'm going to click on that. And you'll notice it gives us our 3D view, but it also gives us a UV view here, right? You can kind of see how it's like a 2D grid. And you have some specific UV tools in here, right? Now remember, I have text tools add-on installed on this, and I'll kind of remind you guys about how to do that later on. We don't really need it for our UV unwrapping on this character, but it's got some cool baking tools, which we'll use for sculpting later on. Now, one of the things you can also do is you can actually go to, because also when you go to UV Editing Workspace, you see how it kind of changes which property is available? It goes to the green triangle. In there is a section called UV Maps. You can open that up and you can name your UV map. Double left click on it, right? Just like if you're going to name these objects, double left click on it. And that will allow me to call this biped, if I can spell biped correctly. Biped gear, and now that's named. But I can't really unwrap this until I've set up seams, right? So this is where that kind of clothing, kind of pelt mapping analogy comes in, right? To get the skin off an animal, you have to, well, cut into the skin, right? And you kind of peel it off. But if you look at clothing, clothing has seams, right? Where it was initially a couple of different separate pieces of fabric that were kind of essentially two-dimensional. So we need to add seams. The nice thing is it's really easy to do in Blender. We go to 2 for edge mode, because seams are edges, basically. So we go 2 for edge mode. Now, this gear is simple enough that it's going to be quite easier for us to do some quick unfolds here. I'm just going to put a seam through here, because that way we'll kind of get a front and a back that are pretty low distortion for the eye. It'll work pretty good for us. I'm going to shift double left click here, right? Because remember, double left click selects our edge loop, right? Double left click selects our edge loops. Now, in this case, what I want is I want the top of this kind of shoulder pad gear and the bottom to come off into their own parts. Blender calls them islands, right? They're kind of like UV objects, if you will. Now, the nice thing is I can mark seams as I go. So if you're in edge mode, 2 for edge mode to select seams, if I right click, wait, is this still recording? No, it's still recording. Okay. Didn't look like it was recording. Sorry. So if I right click, it brings up my edge context menu, right? And we've seen some of these other tools in here, right? Way down here is something called markseam. This is all you have to do to make seams in Blender. Select the edge loops you want to be your seams, and then mark the seam. See how they go red? Now in this case, I kind of have full thickness inside of this gear. So I'm going to probably want to do an edge loop down there, kind of so the inner part and the outer part of the clothing can go together. I'm actually going to want to have a seam kind of going through here. Oops, let me undo. Actually, just let me redo those. Remember, shift double left click, right? Shift double left click. Now you notice that that's basically kind of like our inseam, right? You know how your pants kind of have an inseam? So believe it or not, setting up seams for characters, creatures, very much like the seams on clothing. So if you're trying to figure out where to put a seam at, look at clothing, right? Hands, gloves. Gloves are a really good indicator of where the seam should be at on hands. But otherwise, like a shirt or pants are a good indicator of where your seam should be there. I'm also going to kind of put in a little seam right through here. So shift, remember shift adds, shift double left click, shift double left click. That way, kind of these pop off on their own. So see how kind of any edge loop that's kind of around this thinner part where we thickened, that should be selected, right? Now the last thing is I really kind of want to pop the strap here off on its own. So what I'll do is I'll just do shift double left click, and I can do it closer to the base, but I'm going to keep it easier for you guys. Shift double left click. And then of course, right click, mark seam. We now have all of our seams for UV unwrapping. So what we do is we go to 3 for face mode, right? So 3 for face mode, and we go to select all, right? There is a select menu, select all, Control A is the quick key for that. That selects everything, and you'll see that our actual UVs are not really laid out well, right? Now, for this one, I'm not going to create a distortion grid because we're going to do a second video for the body, and I'll kind of delve into that there. Generally, this should work out pretty well for us, even without seeing the distortion grid. So in the next video, I will do a distortion grid for us, right? You could do it through your materials here, like you go to material and you add a color map to it. If you have text tools, right, plug in, you can kind of do it through here. But I'll save that for the next video. This one I'm just going to show you guys how to unwrap it. We can always go back and tinker with it on the next video. But now that we've got all those faces selected and we have seams marked, remember that's just right click, mark seam when you're in edge mode, I can go to the UV menu here, and you'll see there's a menu called Unwrap, right? So we're in the UV Editing Workspace. We go to the UV menu. In the UV menu, there is an area called Unwrap. The very top is Unwrap. And what this will do is it'll actually take these, break them apart, right? Peel them out and make them low distortion. I can already tell right now that this is going to look pretty good with our distortion grid on, right? I've been doing this long enough, I know that those will work pretty well for us. We are still going to do our body for this guy, right? I want to show you guys how to do a distortion grip, but I feel like we'll do it in the next video because we got the slightly late start because of computer problems, right? But that gives you kind of the foray into understanding and using your UV stuff, right? So at a core level, we can see that you just make seams, right? You select edge loops to make seams. These will be good ones for your gear or clothing. And then, of course, in edge mode, you right-click to mark a seam. And then once you've done that, you go to 3 for face mode, select all, right? Select all. And then if you're in UV Editing Workspace, right, UVunwrap. And you see that it took those seams and it kind of pulled them apart at those seams into their own little objects, their islands. That's what Blender calls them, islands. But you can see they're also kind of peeled off and straightened out and kind of smoothed to be low wrinkle or low distortion. We'll talk about that more in the next video, though, as we unwrap the actual character creature. So I will address it in our next video, but I didn't want to go too long today. I just want to introduce you some basics for it, and then we'll do the same stuff again on our body for the biped, and we'll talk a little more about distortion grids and if you need to tweak some stuff on it. But I figure that'll be a great kind of quick start for introducing you guys to some UV unwrapping for this character creature. So in this case, I will stop recording the video.